Hello, friends. It's Steve here, and today is August 25th, and today I'm going to be talking a bit about and thinking about some aspects of the book Attuned by Thomas Hübl, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. Thomas Hübl is about 52 years of age. He's perceived by many to be a modern day mystic, and he's also, I'm going to get out of the picture so that the water shows up more, and he's also has a doctorate, and he's a trauma therapist, at least some type of psychologist or therapist. And I'm on page 183 or so of the book, and I'm just looking to see how many pages of the book there are. 221 pages in the book. 182, yeah. And today, like many days, I awakened from the dream world. Oh, and by the way, there's a healing field set up for the videos that I do today. So if you're listening to a video, then you can, at the start of each video, you can just say, I ask that all my helpers and guides be a part of this healing field, and then your helpers and guides will be a part of it. And your helpers and guides will know if you're watching this, they'll know that you're watching it, and they'll know you're watching something where a healing field is set up. So if you're watching it, you can state those words out loud, just acknowledging that you have helpers and guides that are helping you with everything. So I woke up again this morning. I woke up to a bit of intensity in the dream world, where I was driving a car and I was going to turn left and cross a road, and I looked ahead and everything seemed cleared, and I started to go across the road, and kind of out of nowhere, this turquoise colored Jeep like car all of a sudden came into my view, and I applied my brakes to stop, and and I wasn't in that lane, but I was, on the edge of that lane, and the driver clipped the front of my car. And I watched what happened after that. I pulled out. I followed the driver to see where he was going to park. To even in the dream world, you gotta exchange license, driver's licenses and insurance information. So I was heading down the road to do that, and I did that with the person. And the person was extremely agitated. And I think that, as I processed the dream a bit in the dream world, as I processed it, I was aware that it just, when a person's agitated, it's just not of much value to get into a polarity with the person in terms of who's right, whose perception is accurate. So I was thinking about that while I was in the dream. But the dream startled me, so I woke fairly soon after the accident in the dream world. And as I laid there just kind of processing, because whether something is, quote, real or not, if we perceive it as real, we physically, mentally, emotionally, chemically react to it as it is real. Even if, so this will go and this will lead into the book Attuned by Thomas Hubel. If we have unresolved experiences, our unresolved experiences, oftentimes the energy of them is triggered by something that happens in our life, oftentimes in relationship to someone else. And so the emotions from triggering from the old event that's unresolved show up in this next event. And then we're working with that energy. And I had a conversation, and I don't, I have conversations with people relative to healing sessions that I do with them. I have conversations relative to people that I live with, and occasionally friends that I talk to over the phone that I just have conversations with. And from time to time, people that I meet when I'm rarely out and about. But I have a male friend that I interact with more on the island, sometimes on the phone, sometimes together in physical space together. And it felt like, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, because they're all kind of blurry, but I think it was yesterday that we had a conversation, and I was able, and it felt like he got triggered, and I was able to recognize that he was triggered and not get triggered by his triggering. So typically, if we have unresolved energy within us, and someone else has unresolved energy within them, may not relate to us, but it just doesn't matter. Their unresolved energy comes to the surface, and then their mentality clicks in, and they begin explaining reality to you, which is the reality that they've made up, because reality is a construct, it is made up. So they begin explaining their reality to you based on their triggering. And typically, you begin pointing out how their reality is wrong and your reality is right based on your triggering of their triggering. If you haven't had this happen, bless you. You've been on this planet however many years and this hasn't happened to you frequently, then then I bow at your feet, and I choose to study with you, Master. But it's step by step along the way. And when we know, like, there was a period of time I was trying to learn to make cookies, and I had no recipe. I was just putting some things together and cooking them and seeing what they came out like. And my wife said to me, well, you know what? Sometimes if you just follow the recipe, things have a greater chance of coming out in a way that you like them. So I did, and she was right, which is, for a man, that could be a painful experience when their wife is right, because there's something in the genetic programming that, like, it's a patriarchy, men need to be right, women need to be quiet or something, whatever the patriarchy. There's a whole bunch of rules in the patriarchy, and that's a thought form. So you may not know of a patriarchy, and you may not follow any of the rules of patriarchy. But I was very well aware of the patriarchy within my family of origin. And so there's kind of, with some of the men on the planet, and some women as well, but some of the men on the planet, there's this feeling that they need to be right, almost in a desperate attempt to be right, because quite possibly they feel so wrong about so many things that they have to be right. Otherwise, they have to have a lot of emotions come to the surface that are unresolved from their experiences in childhood. But anyway, my wife was right, and I followed the recipe. The cookies came out the best that they had come out. And then once I followed the recipe a number of times, I began to get a real sense of the making of cookies and what it required. And I began to go off grid, and I began to experiment with knowledge. Now, there's one thing, experiment without knowledge, and you just, kind of you fail, and you go, oh, these are miserable. Who can eat these things? And then you follow directions, and you actually create something that's edible, and then you get better at it, and it gets more and more edible and more whatever over a period of time. One of the things that was suggested in the book Attuned was that in any situation of triggering, if one of the two that are in the triggering polarity, if one of the two can reach a level of maturity where they don't get triggered by someone's triggering, then they can hold a space and hold that space, even whether there's conversation or no conversation. And so I had the experience of that really strongly when I was talking with my friend. And there was a number of things that it talks about in the book. If somebody's triggered, how they go into the mind and they begin telling their stories and they need to be right and all of that stuff. And if you don't really do anything necessarily to make them feel bad, then they might be able to begin to feel safe with the energies that they're uncomfortable with. So that happened, and some really interesting things happened in that conversation that I think will lead to a change in the relationship over time. Especially, I'm pretty sure he's ordered the book, and maybe he's already reading it. And he's ordered the Mayan calendar. So I think it, as of a day or two ago, it hadn't arrived yet, but it'll be here soon enough. And so today, I came out of the dream world, and I felt like I needed to write, and I felt like it was okay to write when I was working with a lot of energy. But you can tell if you're working with, you can tell the difference between working with a lot of energy and being triggered. Like if you're working with a lot of energy, you're not triggered into working with a lot of energy, you're just aware. Kind of like you're aware in a mature way. When someone else is triggered, you can be mature in an aware way when you're working with a lot of energy without getting triggered by your working with a lot of energy. Hope this makes sense to some of you, because I'm having it begin to make sense to me as I'm having these experiences. So when I woke up this morning, I was feeling kind of, I've been through, you've heard the dark night of the soul experience, and you might have experienced it yourself, or you might have just heard about it, read about it, somebody talked about it, you have some mental knowledge about it, or you might have gone through it yourself, where you just went through a really dark period of time, however long, and finally released these energies that were part of that dark night or week or month of the soul. And then those energies came out, and you came out the other side, and you had an increase in awareness. So I've had any number of these. And I would say, I'm just going to put a number on it because I like the number 11. I'm just going to say I've been through this at least 11 times, if not 22 or 44. But I've been through this a number of times where I've stayed with the energies, worked with the energies, came out the other side, and felt like I'd resolved something. And this happens every time in a healing session. So I've been through that thousands of times where all these disturbed energies came up and then they released, and then we came out the other side, and then there was a change. There was healing that took place from the experience. So every time we're willing to do this, this is potentially going to happen, is we're going to heal from this, especially if a healing field's set up while you're listening to this. That may even add to it more. So I've been feeling and writing a little bit about, so I think more writing than necessarily verbalizing, but I've been writing about kind of the all these wars that seem to be going on continually. So, and I think I've written in the last couple of days about that. But this morning, that was really up really strongly. And also yesterday, as I was cleaning the house, I was feeling again a lot of this emergent energy that was really uncomfortable to me, and I decided it would be useful to just think about the things that I'm grateful for. So I did that, and I also wrote about that this morning, how that affected me, how it brought me into a different space. But when I picked up the Attuned book this morning, and I was in this kind of dark night of soul kind of experience, and I'd worked with these energies the day before, but here I was working with these energies again, and Thomas began talking about how when we first start allowing ourselves to be more aware, even if we first started allowing ourselves to be more aware 50 years ago or whatever, each time we allow more of our awareness to awaken, that separation between our conscious and our unconscious mind, the veil shifts between the two minds, and we begin having much more of a conscious-unconscious relationship in our mind. So the things that our conscious mind kind of tries to protect us from, we begin allowing in through our unconscious mind or subconscious mind, where all these memories are stored. So it's not like you ever actually forget things that happen to you. It's like they're charged or no longer charged. So if they're charged, they're called a trauma, and if they're no longer charged, they're called an experience. And once they're not charged, we don't mind remembering that this thing happened to us. We do mind remembering it if it still brings up pain from the experience. Like the blow to my ear that I've talked about in a number of videos. That was really shocking. And when I just said it again, I realized most of that energy is out of that ear. So I want to just talk briefly about the being Abrahamanad. So in 1996, I did a 1-year process of training because I had agreed to do some event that was going to occur in 97. And they wouldn't tell me what it was about. They were just telling me what I needed to do to get ready for it. And then in December of 96, I was given a date of March 22nd, 23rd of 97, where I was going to be led to a hillside with a vortex, and some process was going to take place. So, I was led to that hillside. The people who owned the property, it was a llama farm, told me, or told my friend that it was fine that I do ceremony up there on those days, and a tent was set up. And what I found out was that the new soul of the earth, which is I think a 13,000 year position. And I think it's a volunteer position. But um, the being who's volunteered for the next 13,000 years on Earth is a being named Abrahamanad. And I actually had a chance to talk with him as he was incarnating. There's a funny story about how I leaned over and said my name and where I lived, and the being stopped, put on the brakes, and turned around and said, I'm perfectly aware of who you are, and thanks for what you've done. And I'm going to be busy for the next 28 years because I'm going to be systematically raising the vibration of the planet, which is going to take people through a healing process. And there's going to be 7 years of physical, 7 years of mental, 7 years of emotional, 7 years of spiritual. And that process of change and cleansing is going to complete on March 23rd of 2025. So we're 7 months away from that, minus 2 days. 2 days less than 7 months away from that date of completion of a 28-year cycle of cleansing. So if you feel like things were pretty hot over the past 4.5 years during this process of, the quote pandemic, whatever that was, and all the cartoons that were made up showing doctors and nurses dancing. If that wasn't enough, if it wasn't enough that you had to work from home and your business was shut down and the whole planet went through some incredibly chaotic times. But if it seems like it does to me, and if it does to you too, then this may help. If it seems like it's staying intense, I would just say that one could expect it to remain fairly intense for this last 7 months of this 28-year cleansing process. It just makes sense to me that we stick with it, we do it, and if I can support you in any way, I think these healing fields that I set up, there's the healing field for the world healing field is up all the time. It's been up for 4.5 years. I don't know if it'll be necessary after March 23rd of 2025, but if it is, it'll still be set up. And if I'm not holding it, someone else will be grounding the energy of it. But there's plenty of us continually grounding the energy of it. So if you need a healing field, that healing field's always set up, and you can just think about the world healing field and think about releasing energy, and others will be helping you release, ground, and integrate that energy. Okay, that's the probably the conversation about the book Attuned. Where I opened it up today, it was talking about war, and it was talking about the history of Russia and Ukraine. It was very interesting and thought-provoking and such. Okay, I think that's enough from this aspect, and then we'll see what else that I may do in terms of videos related to healing for this morning of June 25th. So at this point, I guess I'll just say, once again, namaste.